Welcome. This is the opening day for this new exhibit by artist Arun Drummond. And he's here to do an artist talk and also talk about his work and what inspired it. Arun is a South Carolina native residing in the Low Country. As the former manager of the Chuma Gullah Gallery, he spent nearly 20 years educating guests about the rich and truly unique culture of the coastal South. He's been painting since 2004, and his mixed media works have been featured on Food Network and in Condé Nast Traveler magazine. Please help me welcome artist Arun Drummond.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie. Natalie, thank you for that great introduction, and thank you to everyone that has taken the time out of their day to come and listen to me and hear me talk about my art and the effect that it has on the world. So I'm going to start with what I have to the right here, and it's a sheet that says collectively disconnected. And that is actually a poster from the last exhibit that I had that was actually here in this auditorium about a year and 4 months ago. And I want to start with that because what it does is give you a primer on the style of work that I do. You know, doing that exhibit allowed me to share with the world for the first time the symbolism that I weave into my art. So in order to understand what I'm doing, I think we need to kind of go back and get that education. So the symbolism I'm going to showcase on this painting here. This is a painting I do called The Matriarch. Represents my grandmother, it represents all matriarchs that we're all familiar with, you know, the glue that really holds the family together. And the first thing that's listed are the separated heads. You know, when you look at the work in this exhibit and throughout this one, you'll see there's never a neck there, there's always a separation. And for me, what that represents is the separation that many African Americans have from their homeland. A separation that we carry with us, whether we acknowledge it or not, is something that is within us because of the history that we have through our ancestors. The unfinished baskets, for those that may not be familiar with sweetgrass basketry, you know, it is a West African weaving technique. The baskets were used to process most of the rice that was grown in this area. And what people don't realize is that when I leave these baskets unfinished, it's not because I'm being lazy. I'm leaving them unfinished to showcase that this is a culture that's ongoing, something that's not dying, something that continues on. Can you guys hear me without the microphone?
Yes. Use the mic.
Use the mic, okay. Next, we have the featureless faces. You know, that's a tool that a lot of folk artists use. One, because faces are hard. But two, the featureless faces also represent the fact that African Americans have been stripped of their identity. So when you see my figures, they don't have a defined face or a defined person that I'm drawing here, and it's representing that stripping of identity because a lot of the times we're only seen as our color. The contrasting palettes, what that really speaks to is on this palette how I paint most of the figures almost the same color as the background. You'll see that throughout the Low Tide series that I'm working on. And that is to showcase that if we don't pay attention to documenting and preserving this culture, it will fade away into the background. So that kind of gives you an understanding of why my art looks the way it does. You know, it's very simplistic, but there's a lot of layers built into that. So I wanted you to understand what my motives are and what the purpose is. So now we're going to talk about the materials that I use. This series called High Society, Low Tide. And the high society part of the exhibit takes you to an imagined world. I want you to imagine the Victorian era. I want you to imagine a world that exists without slavery. I want you to imagine a world where emancipation and Juneteenth did not need to exist. So that's where I'm taking you to. So using these antique rugs, using vintage rugs, using period frames that are from the 19th century, some of them. What I'm trying to do is set a backdrop. I'm trying to transport you to this time, to this place, to this era, and showcase these figures in a place where they could strive, where they could grow and become Black elite without the weight on their shoulders that we and our ancestors had to deal with our reality that we live in. So a lot of the times, as an artist, you think, can I really be that imaginative? Can I really be that abstract? Yes, we can, because I think in a world where we can imagine the Black elite, or we can imagine a group of people without oppression, that's a place that I always want to try to strive to. I think a lot of the reason why, I think unconsciously, what led me to doing the series was from a trip to London, England that I took back in 2016. It was my first time visiting Europe. And I can remember walking around Piccadilly Square and walking around a lot of the tourist areas in London. And I would see Black businessmen, walking about, going on their day. I could see, younger guys that were, walking in groups and enjoying their existence. It's almost like I could see them walking through the streets without any sort of oppression that I think a lot of our youth walks around with. Not just our youth, even when you look at people that are my generation and older, I think there's a lot of weight on our shoulders. And I had the sense when I was in London that seeing these strong, powerful Black men walking around, that they didn't have that same weight oppressing them. So I think unconsciously that was kind of where this series was born, wanting to imagine a place where that weight isn't pressing us down. So I'm not an expert on our nation's history, but I know that in this fourth year of Juneteenth being a nationally celebrated holiday, that having an exhibit like this is going to give not only me a voice, but all of us a voice to continue celebrating this holiday and bringing joy when our 250,000 ancestors were released during the emancipation. We're going to bring joy to them as well. So with that said, I have a short video I want to show, and it's going to showcase a 8-month period of me creating this series from start to finish, and then we'll continue the talk after that, okay? 8 months condensed down to about 5 minutes. And I did that to let folks know that, as artists, we're creative and this kind of comes naturally, but there's still a lot of hard work that goes into these exhibits, a lot of thought, and a lot of hands-on. So I just wanted people to actually see some of that process and understand these exhibits don't happen overnight, So one thing that you may have noticed in the video was that many of the backgrounds for the High Society series, they are painted to mimic mirrors. You see a reflection on them, and that is one of the new symbols that I'm adding to my wheelhouse. I made most of them look like a reflection or a mirror so that when someone looks at this, they can see themselves reflected in this image of wealth, this image of power, this image of strength that these people in this imagined world represent. So using the mirror is going to be a strong symbol that I will continue using through my work. Because if we can see ourselves, then hopefully we can see ourselves in a better future. And I'd like to end by asking, what do you see in this series that I created? How has art affected how you see the Juneteenth holiday? And how is it celebrated in other parts of the country? Those are questions I want to leave you with, because I want my art to always start conversations, get people thinking, and see perspectives that they've never seen before. Thank you. So I'm open to any questions, if anyone has any. Sure. So this series is the low country part of the series. So when you think about emancipation, although it was a happy period because folks were freed, it still was a low point in history because these folks are starting without anything in the world. They're digging essentially out of a very, very low area. So calling it the Low Country series kind of showcases that. And this represents our Low Country Gullah descendants. They were trying their best to hang on to ways of life like language and basket weaving and foodways, all these things that link them back to their West African ancestry. So I'm trying to document those things through the work, showcasing how important family is, like the piece in the middle, showing the large family there. Showcasing how the basketry is passed down, showcasing the 3 women passing down that, that through the different generations, And also I paint this series on a natural element. I'm painting on linen, which is very natural. So, I use natural elements to highlight all the natural elements that are actually in the baskets. So this series, what inspired it is what I'm surrounded by every day, and that's all of our wonderful low country people and the legacy and the lineage that they're trying to hang on to, and that I'm trying to document and preserve and promote through my work. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Did you make the sweet grass basket?
That's a very good question. It's actually a question I get a lot because I'm a vendor at the historic Charleston City Market. So that's where you can come and find my work on a daily basis. And I get that question at least twice a day from the tourists and the many visitors that come through there. So the answer to the question is I learned how to actually do the sweetgrass baskets about 5 years ago. That's when I started this series. I learned very quickly that I would need some help, and I'm lucky because my art got popular very fast and I couldn't keep up with it. So I do work with two other basket families that do a lot of the baskets for me. And they are very happy to get a call and hear that I need X number of baskets because I have a big project coming up, or I can't get, I can't do enough for what I need this week. So they're always happy to get that call. And I'm proud to say that one of the basket weavers that I work with has work in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., has work in the IAM Museum, the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. So I'm very proud of the weavers that I work with because they've accomplished a lot for the culture and showcasing it on not just a local level, but at a national level. So great question. Yes, sir, Mr. Days.
What's your process for selecting a title? They're very catchy and with your art, I'm curious, do you select a title first and then create it? Or you create your art and then you look at it?
So the titles are fun. That's the fun aspect of it. A lot of the times when I'm creating the art, I'm trying to get my lines right and be precise and make sure that I'm creating a beautiful product. But then once it's finished, then I get to relax and have fun with the titles. So I always try to make sure that the titles are on subject. Right now this is an exhibit for Juneteenth, so you'll see some of the vocabulary from that era used in these titles. A lot of the pieces from the High Society collection, I got to use words like opulence, and I got to use words like, royal, because that's the way I want to imagine our people. So I've always loved English, and I got to sit down with a dictionary and really figure out what words really fit, and that's how I got to them. Yeah.
We had a microburst on Monday the 10th at 12 a.m.
Uh-huh.
That was the day you were installing this,
Yes.
and there was no power in
So you saw that in the video. I think it was Sunday when the real power outage happened, but it happened again while I was here. But that didn't hold me back. I knew I had you guys here. I knew I needed to hang this show and talk about what we're doing. And so we can't let nature hold us back. Yeah. Okay, anyone else?
Are you upstate or from there or family up there? And how do you see the difference? Like, I guess it's more immediate. A lot of the Gullah Geechee stuff in Charleston what brought you to working in art in Charleston, and so that's one question.
Yeah, so I have lived in Charleston, South Carolina since 2004. I grew up in a little small town called Greer, South Carolina, in the upstate, and so I've been in Charleston for almost half of my life. And when I first arrived there, I had the wonderful opportunity to start working for a place called the Chuma Gallery. It was the most well-known African-American art gallery in Charleston at the time. It started in the 90s. So by the time I was a part of it, there were already established artists like Jonathan Green that were being represented by Mr. Chuma. So I got a crash course in what local culture was, and it didn't take long for me to become passionate about preservation, passionate about educating people about that culture. And after being with that gallery for 16 years, the creativity just started to ooze into me. I started to absorb it. So I would go home and create abstract art, and it was not long after when Mr. Chuma actually inspired me to create work that was more representational, folk art that told stories. And Mr. Chuma is from Nigeria, from Lagos, I should say. And a part of their culture is when you have someone that is employed by you, that has been loyal, that you set them up for what their next adventure is. So I didn't know it at the time, but him encouraging me to create folk art, to tell more stories, was him setting me up for what the rest of my life would be like. And I'm grateful for that in so many, many different ways. But you're right, from the low country, from the upstate to the low country was my journey. But I feel like, even when I travel today, I travel all around the country, even abroad, and I'm always happy to come back home because the low country is my home now.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff up there, like we had Glennis Redmond in our library talking about, and I know there was indigo plantations up there and everything, but yeah, I think it's like less recognized sometimes.
Yeah, you look at crops like cotton and indigo that were a little more apparent when rice was definitely the main thing that drove the economy here in the low country.
Is that building, was that a slave market, or was it just the customs house, or was it both in Charleston?
So we have...
There's a market and the customs.
Yeah, so you have many examples of places where slaves were bought, held, and sold in Charleston. And I'm glad that our city hasn't erased those places. We need to learn from our history, and removing those places I don't think is a good thing. So I'm glad that they're there so people can still witness where a lot of this history happened. Yeah. All the way in the back there.
Is your work for sale?
So yes, I mentioned earlier that I am in the historic Charleston City Market, Sunday through Thursday. That's where you can find my work. My work's also in the Gibbs Art Museum in Charleston in their museum store. I was honored to be invited to have my work there because it's our major museum. So you can find it there. I have also just recently been invited to be part of the vendor program that's in the International African American Museum in Charleston. I just found that news out about 2 days ago, so you're the first people to hear about it. And I feel like I've manifested it. When I had my first solo exhibit here a year and 4 months ago, I had no idea the blessings that would continue to come, and that's the most recent one. And as far as my work for sale here, I've got plenty of it on display, and it's all available, and including the pieces that are in the exhibit, but those will have to stay on display until the end of the exhibit on July 28th before they can be picked up or shipped out to you. Yeah. And did I see one other hand back there on the right? Okay.
Oh, actually, are the ones on the table there?
Mm-hmm.
Those are sale too.
Those are totally available. Yes, those are my the many paintings that I do. When I say many, I mean small in size. I realize that I want my art to be accessible to everyone. So if that means making smaller pieces that still have a powerful story, that's why I do that size. So those are definitely available. Yeah.
Do you think like the COVID, the George Floyd 2020 time period, did that affect any of your, I think you started before that working, but did any of that affect your mindset? Or I know you did like a Black Joy exhibit too.
Totally. You've got great questions, I need to say. So during 2020, in March of that year is when I started really showcasing my artwork in a more deliberate way. And when George Floyd was happening, I was actually traveling on a road trip across country and listening to the radio or hearing on the internet all the things that were happening in my city, in Charleston, the riots and things like that, was challenging to witness because I was so far away. As far as did it affect my work, it totally did, because once I returned, I realized that art is a powerful thing. And if I can use my platform to educate and document and preserve any aspects of our history, including current ones like that story there, I'm going to continue to do that, because if we don't use the platforms we have for the greater good and to do something great in the world, then what are we here for? So watching everyone come together during the George Floyd period in our country was uplifting, and to see those conversations being had and starting those conversations that have continued today definitely was an inspiration and keeps me going. So, yes, sir.
And there was also a residency program. Does that help you? I guess it's a new house that they have there.
Yeah, so he's speaking of a place called South Porch Artist Residency in Summerville, South Carolina. And it was started as a place for artists from all around the country to come and create with other artists. I had my first residency there back in October, and that's where this High Society series was started. That's where the first few clips of the video were taken. So that residency not only was the birthplace of this series, but it also inspired me to get my studio, which has just changed the way that I work. And I realized that residencies can be powerful, and I've done 2 others since then. And if there's any other people that are creative, I recommend that you look for them as well, because they can be life-changing. Yeah.
I was going to say too, the market. Does it seem like people come off the Carnival cruises, or is it busy, all year, parts of the year? What is it like? Do people ask you the same questions all the day? The Palmetto Road kids eating out roses. Busy, right?
Yeah, the city market is a place that has a really varied history, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I try not to read too deep into any of the negativity that could be planted around it. I go there every day, proud of my art, proud of the message that I'm putting out, knowing that I'm helping to document and preserve a culture that deserves being preserved. So any of the other mess, I just kind of let that float by and try to honor the market in the way that I can and control what's in my control. Yeah. Okay. And I think that was it for questions. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming out, and I'll be hanging out if you have more questions after the talk, okay? Thanks again.